Here's an interview from one of our past shows on Rock and Metal Revival. If you're interested in hearing full shows, go to our Facebook page and check out our list of affiliates for times and places where you can hear Rock and Metal Revival. There's new music from Lee-Aaron. It's called Vampin' right here. That's from her latest release, Radio On. And today we want to welcome Lee-Aaron to Rock and Metal Revival. Welcome to the show.
Hey, and good to be here, guys.
It's great to have you. You know, Lee, listen, we were talking off the air, I said this album is quality front to back, and then I read in one of the press releases that it was written, correct me if I'm wrong, in one weekend?
That is correct.
How does that happen?
Everybody in my band is pretty talented. We're all, except for my husband, of course, he's a talented guy, but he's not a singer. But Dave and Sean and I, we all sing. We all are songwriters. And my husband is also a writer and an amazing arranger. And, the first couple albums I did with this unit, because I've been working with, obviously, my husband about 20 years. Dave Reimer's been in the band about 16 years. Sean Kelly's been in the band about 8 years, and we were just really kind of hitting a stride, I think, as a unit in terms of locking in and really getting comfortable working together. And we'd written the last two studio albums, Fire and Gasoline in 2016 and Diamond Baby Blues in 2018. We'd written them by sending files back and forth because we are a bi-coastal band. Sean lives in Toronto, and the rest of us live on the West Coast. But this time, what I can tell you is that when we get in a room together, the four of us, magical things happen. And I just knew that if we got a chance to work together and bounce ideas off each other in real time, that things would take on a different shape. And so I called Dave and Sean and said, look, let's just get together for a weekend. Just bring your best 3 song ideas. Your top 3 song ideas that you've got in the, brewing right now. And let's get together as a band and just see what happens. Let's get together for a weekend, right? I was thinking we might walk out of this with, 4 or 5 new really killer tracks. And we got together, and by the end of that weekend, it was like, holy crap, we have an album,
Nice. Yeah.
Everything that we were working on fit with a lyric idea. Like, I have a little book I carry around with me everywhere that I'm constantly writing ideas and thoughts and rhymes and schemes and things in it. And everything that we worked up had worked with some of my lyric ideas. And by the end of the weekend, man, the nuts and bolts of this album, they were written. I took all those ideas away and I did a little bit of melodic and lyric revision to it, but the choruses were solid. And so yeah, no word of a lie. We hammered it out in a weekend.
Wow.
And
nice.
Our only motivation, really, I like to plant ideas with my guys, and I'm like, do you remember when we were all 18, and we'd get together in the basement for the weekend or the garage, and we'd just all we wanted to do was eat pizza and drink beer and have our friends come. Our friends were the audience, and they'd sit on the sofa and tell us how great our ideas were. Let's just pretend we're
Nice.
back there and, just writing some songs that we think would impress our friends and our friends would think were cool. Because I figured if we went into it with that spirit, that we would just write some things that were unfiltered, and we weren't thinking about writing radio hits or anything. We were just writing some songs we thought were cool. And that's how Radio On evolved.
Nice. Like, a lot of bands take years to write an album. So I was thinking there must be some magical Canadian weed going on around up there now, or what? To get so much creativity out of people, but yeah, I don't know. But I really liked the live album you put out, the Power Soul and Rock and Roll album. That was really cool, and I liked that Strat you have on the cover. It's pretty slick. And you got some great guitar tones on this new album. What guitars and amps were you guys using to record this new album?
Well, that's interesting. You'd be better off asking Sean that question.
Yeah.
I know he's got a variety of. I know he used a variety of different guitars. Sean owns a lot of guitars. Yeah, I have. I have a Strat and a Telecaster. I leave the virtuoso guitar playing for Sean. I'm, and I've said this many times. I'm a hack on guitar. I have good. I am. I have actually really good rhythm, but I'm not a Liberace on guitar. Sean, I leave that up to Sean. Yeah. So he used, I believe, mostly just a basic Marshall on this album, but one of the things that we, and again, we don't like to use a lot of digital trickery. I want to preface this by saying that you're not going to hear drum loops on our album. You're not going to hear pitch correction and all that shebang, all that stuff that a lot of modern people are using. You know, you're not going to hear that kind of stuff, because I believe in being a band, playing in the room live off the floor at the same time. But there are a few tricks and tools we've been able to use. One of the new tools is called a Kemper. It's a plug-in, and it's basically allows you to, say, take a guitar tone and reamp it and make it sound like it's coming through any amp.
Oh.
So I know we used the Kemper on a few things, and reamped some of the solos and some of the guitar tones just to get to get them into a slightly sweeter spot, right?
Nice, yeah.
So that is one of the things that we did do on this album. But we did start out with just great tones to begin with, and of course, Mike Fraser, who was my mixer, whom I worked with, he described mixing to me because he loves cooking as well. He described it, and he said it's like mixing all these flavors together, like when I'm cooking mushroom soup or something. And I went, wow, I've never heard anyone describe it like that, you know. So, you know, we sat together in the studio and worked on all the mixes together. And, yeah, there were definitely places where, you know, I'm like, you know, do we really need that extra guitar on the left? It almost sounds bigger if you take it away. I'm kind of a less is more person when it comes to mixing. I think that more layers don't necessarily make things sound better. In fact, quite often it makes it sound muddy and cluttered. So I'm kind of a, you know, you want the drums to sound bigger? Well, take a couple toms away and play with a smaller kit, because then it's going to sound really big, like Bonham. You know?
Yeah, exactly. You know, Lee, I've always been a fan of female-fronted bands, Heart, and over the years, you know, and it just seems more and more like in the music genre, it's women are starting to take over in rock and roll. I mean, your Taylor Momsons and your Lizzie Hales and your Maria Brinks and your Amy Lees, and it's a really good time to have a female rock album out there. Do you see that same thing happening in Canada too? I mean, that's really taken off.
There's a few Canadian artists. Yeah, one of my favorites is a lady from Kitchener, Nick, called J.J. Wild. She's younger, and she's really cool. She's a little more alternative rock. You know, it's interesting, because when I started out in the 80s, I wanted to be a girl rocker because I was influenced by probably my biggest influence was Ann and Nancy Wilson. The Girls in Heart, you know, I was just enamored with them when I was a teenager, and I remember getting that Baby Lestrange album, and remember that cover with their, and I was like, I want hair like that. I want a choker like that. I want to sound like that, you know. You know, I know that was a few albums in, and of course I loved Dreamboat Annie and Little Queen and Magazine and those earlier albums as well, but they were one of my biggest inspirations. And you know, the Runaways, you know, I had Queens of Noise. I was like 13. I'm like, damn, I'm down with this. This is so cool. You know, I wanted to pick up a guitar and be a girl rocker. And Suzi Quatro, Joplin. You know, I went on later to discover all these earlier artists as well. And but it was tough, you know. It was tough being a girl in the 80s because, especially the era that I grew up in, which was the post, you know, Grace Slick, post Janis Joplin era, something weird happened to women, you know, in that era, where all of a sudden, you know, you needed to be marketed like a sex symbol. All the record, that whole corporate rock industry of the 80s pushed us into this corner where we were kind of stuck being objectified. So I had people asking me, literally on my 6th album, which came out in 91, who wrote my hit songs? And I was just getting so pissed off. I'm like, me. You know, like, I am an artist, and I'm because that whole industry in the 80s spawned a whole bunch of other female, like what record companies tried to do is they tried to make it the formula. Okay, well, we've got a few artists who are genuine doing this, me, myself being included. You know, they went, let's find, here's this pretty girl that sings and has a powerful voice. Let's find her a bunch of songs, put her with this, with some musicians, and they created a few female artists that were like products in that era as well. I wasn't one of those, but you get sort of lumped into that category. So we were fighting against a lot of sexist obstacles in the 80s. But that whole thing blew open wide in the 90s, where suddenly there was Alanis Morissette and Avril Lavigne and Shirley Manson from Garbage, and who's just a couple of years younger than me, you know, where all of a sudden the landscape changed, where you could be a girl, pick up a guitar, write angry songs, and be taken seriously for what you were doing. And so I like to think that is continued into the new millennia here, and that, nowadays it's a very healthy landscape out there, environment for women to be taken seriously. And I think it's a great, great thing. And all that blood, sweat, and toil that we went through in the 80s, I think, was worth it, because it's changed. And nobody questions that now. No one accuses you of being a novelty or a record company product anymore.
Yeah, the real artists are still here, still creating. So, and now you've done through your career. I mean, you started out real heavy and everything, and then you did some jazzy kind of stuff and everything. What brought you back to the hard rock sound?
Well, I always knew. Well, I took a 12-year hiatus to have kids and raise my family. That was one of the things. A lot of people say, "Where did you go for all that time?" I'm like, well, I was raising my kids, and I learned early on when I tried to take my baby on the road, and she screamed all the way on the red eye from Toronto to Vancouver that this just wasn't going to work out very well. So I needed to really rethink my whole methodology and how I was approaching things. I always knew I'd make another rock record. When I took that hiatus and explored jazz and blues in the 90s, let's be honest, anybody that was attached to melodic rock from the 80s, you couldn't get arrested. Your career was kind of over. I mean, I'm sure you've talked to many artists that have told you that, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I did some albums in the 90s. I did Some Girls Do, which was platinum in 91. 94, I did Emotional Rain, which wasn't as commercially successful as my other albums. And then I did this album called Too Precious in 95, when grunge was in its full-blown state, and it was a commercial failure. However, looking back, I still have a lot of fond feelings, and I have a lot of feedback from fans saying those albums were some of their favorites. So sometimes, you have to think, I'm not making music necessarily for
the masses,
for commercial success. You're doing it for the art's sake, and I have a lot of people tell me those were their favorite records. And then I did jazz and blues because I grew up singing that music in musical theater. I wanted to explore the roots of rock and roll. Before Jimi Hendrix and Jimmy Page and Pete Townsend plugged in their guitars and turned them up to 11. Who do you think they were listening to? They were listening to Howlin' Wolf and Chuck Berry and all of these old blues guys, So for me, it wasn't a departure from rock and roll. It was exploring the roots of rock and roll. So that's what I did. I did a couple jazz and blues records in the early 2000s, and then I had my kids. And when I came back, I I didn't try to filter my writing in 2016 when we put out